The text also raises this question. What has been the critical point between the predominance of deeds and the predominance of knowledge? Perhaps the answer could be that Ibn Arabi himself, as the full moon of Muhammadian sainthood, closes a pre-Akbarian Islamic cycle and inaugurates a second post-Akbarian one, which would correspond symbolically to the waning moon and would conclude with the arrival of the hour. Now, the imminence of the hour and the display of the properties of the intermediate world of imagination. The text of the Kitab al-Isfar carries on saying, "This we have explained is due to the fact that the end of time approaches, that is to say, its consummation, the hour which closes the cycle, and is due to the manifestation of the law which rules the intermediary world, Hukm al-Barzakh." The Sheikh then cites fragments of two prophetic traditions, two hadith, mentioned by the Prophet relative to some of the signs of the advent of the hour. These refer, for example, to a tree endowed with a speech. The author asks himself, this will occur in this world. Will it not be produced perhaps because of the effect of the manifestation of the dwelling of the hereafter, which is the dwelling of animation, at Dar al-Hayawan? The matter being dealt with here is the imaginal world, the domain of active, autonomous imagination and subsistent, enduring images. In this intermediary dimension, analogous to the experience of dreams, the intelligible unites with the sensible, the spiritual with the corporeal. It is the dimension where the visions and the phenomena beyond the tomb, which eschatology describes, take place. In the secular world, the manifestation of the properties of this spiritual plane of the subtle bodies, where all beings are enlivened, animated, and the spatial and temporal dimensions are not linear, will increase in line with the imminence of the arrival of the hour. This realm of the land of reality, the imaginal world, constitutes the key for understanding the sense of time among the Sufis, and in particular among those connected to their parent heritage. Now, the distribution of accumulative knowledge and the overflowing radiation of the belated saints. We now turn our attention to a final paragraph relative to the distribution of knowledge among the Gnostics of the same period. In times of greater general dispersion and distraction of people, more knowledge accumulates and preserves the Gnostic. Ibn Arabi says, knowledge, in this case he uses ilm, knowledge which is at the same time unique and diffuse, required carriers, depositaries of knowledge who actualize it, preserve it, and transmit it. When the number of its carriers grows, due to the proliferation of the just and virtuous fulfillment of duties among people of a specific era, since here we are dealing specifically with knowledge peculiar to the just, ilm al-salihin, knowledge is distributed among them, qusima alayhim, knowledge is distributed among them. This is the reason why it didn't abound among those who preceded us. Moreover, he who had some knowledge did not leave it to be manifested openly, since he had a complete dominion of it. On the contrary, when the bearers or depositaries of knowledge, those who are capable to take responsibility for it, are few in number because of the widespread proliferation of corruption among the common people, the just man, by contrast, receives it in greater abundance, since he takes charge of that part of knowledge that would correspond to each inattentive man, and of which he, the just man, is the heir. And it is for this reason that knowledge, the spiritual opening and the unveiling, are more abundant among those who belong to the later eras, al-mutaakhirun. When some among them possess part of the knowledge, it becomes manifest, since because of its profusion it overflows. May glory be to him who gives to all. Only 5 minutes. Okay. Thus ends the translation of the passage. That which now interests us more about this self seems to exemplify this overflowing profusion of knowledge. I understand from this that the overflowing which forces the mystic to demonstrate and diffuse his knowledge would not be considered at all an imprudence or a reprehensible or inadvisable lack of control in an era in which, precisely because of the obscurity of ignorance and the general distraction of people, the Gnostic remains and disposes of more knowledge, and its diffusion becomes more necessary. The overflowing character of knowledge would not then imply a weakness on the part of the Gnostic, but rather it would attune itself with the needs of those times. We can deduce, assuming we are historically and spiritually in the same cycle as Ibn Arabi deals with, that in our days there would be, according to the Master, fewer just people than in the past, but with a greater proportion of accumulated knowledge, and therefore with a greater responsibility with respect to the amana or divine trust. According to Ibn Arabi's doctrine of sainthood, the number of representatives of the invisible hierarchy, composed by the axis of time, the 4 poles, or the 7 substitutes among other layers, necessarily remains constant in a continuing succession. Since, for example, if the axis were to disappear, the known world would not be able to sustain itself, since the trust has to be preserved until the end of chronological time. That it is that, in principle, the reduction can only be in the number of holy men who do not perform functions in the cosmic order within the ambit of the invisible hierarchy. At the end of the cycle, when God openly shows himself on the judgment day in the great beyond, the chronological restrictions and the cycle of existence disappear, and the epiphany reveals itself. Only then does qualitative spiritual time act as substitute. After commenting Ibn Arabi's text on the predominance of deeds and of knowledge in the hemicycles of the Islamic era, I shall refer briefly to some notions of the author about Muhammadian sainthood.